Right here in Dayton, Ohio. And I'm very excited to be doing this morning because I'm actually a graduate of Greenon High School. I graduated in 1999, which is forever ago. But I'm very happy to be speaking about something that I love to do and something I learned how to do right in our backyard here in the Dayton area. So after I graduated from high school, I went to college, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I went to college and I tried a bunch of different majors, still wasn't sure what I liked until I took a few history classes, and I said, you know what, this is what I love. I love reading, I love learning about things, I loved going to museums. So history was like an amazing fit for me. So I majored in history, and I remember a lot of people asked me, especially my parents, well, what are you going to do with a history major? I said, well, I don't know. I knew I did not want to teach history. I'm just not a person that I think would make a very good teacher. And I knew I didn't want to go to law school. A lot of people who major in history end up going to law school because there's a lot of history involved with litigation and things like that. So I didn't know what I was going to do with my history degree. I just knew I wanted to work somehow in the history field, but I didn't know what that was. As a requirement for my degree, I had to do an internship, and I ended up doing the internship at the Air Force Museum. And this whole new world was opened up to me that I had no idea existed, and this is the world of public history. Public history is essentially the study and practice of museum studies. So if you go to a museum, everything you see on exhibits, everything that, all the words, all the photographs, all the artifacts, all of those things have been chosen by curators. And a curator is somebody who has a background in museum studies and sort of becomes a subject matter expert on whatever they're exhibiting. And then they write the exhibit, they put the artifacts on exhibit, and then they present it to the public. I did my internship at the Air Force Museum and discovered this amazing opportunity that no one told me about either in high school or in college, that this was a career path. And so it really got me excited. Now I knew what I wanted to do with my history degree. And it just so happened that my internship turned into a summer position, which turned into a winter position, which turned into a permanent position. So I basically have been working at the Air Force Museum for the past 18 years as an archivist and a curator. My training, which I received at Wright State University, I have a master's degree in public history with a concentration in archival museum work. So an archivist is somebody who collects and helps preserve two-dimensional archival materials. So think documents, photographs, scrapbooks, film, negatives, things like that. So my master's degree was a lot of fun to do. And again, I did that right here at Wright State University. And it was a very hands-on master's degree program. I was able to learn how to preserve photographs, how to flatten documents, how to organize and describe them to make them useful to researchers. And the other thing I was learning was how to take these documents and use them to help write exhibits in museums. So I love doing my master's degree. It was a lot of fun. We went on a lot of field trips. We went to a lot of museums and did a lot of outreach and work with other people in the museum field, which is very large here, right here in the Dayton area. When I started working at the museum, I worked primarily in the archives. And again, that was a lot of fun. I was reading a lot of diaries from, World War II veterans or, people who served during World War I and, kept a diary or wrote letters home to their family. And I was preserving those, cleaning them, flattening them. Sometimes you have to repair documents because if they're torn. We would do a lot of scanning because we don't like to put original materials on exhibit because, putting archival materials on exhibit is bad. You always make copies. and worked very closely with our exhibit designers to help incorporate them into our exhibits. But over the years, instead of just working in the archives, like my job sort of switched over to the curatorial side. So now I'm really writing exhibits. So for example, if any of you have been to the museum, the Presidential Gallery is one of the exhibits that I did. So all of the words you see on the wall, all of the photographs on the wall, all of the artifacts, myself and another team, actually a whole team of curators, worked to build that exhibit. Coming up this Friday, we're actually opening a new exhibit. It's called the Women in the Air Force exhibit. I did a lot of work with that. So that's coming up. And then this coming December, my next project is the Humanitarian Missions exhibit, and I will be writing that. So I'm in the process of going through our collection, talking to donors and saying, hello, do you have stories to tell us, or do you have artifacts you'd like to donate? Things of that nature. So those are 3 of the projects that I've been working on, primarily for the past 2 years, and moving forward into the next year. So I will tell you, if you're interested in museum studies, it's amazing. There are lots of job opportunities out there. It's a great field to get into, especially if you're willing to travel. I think a lot of times people don't think like, oh, where am I going to get a job at a museum? Well, there's museums everywhere, but you can use a public history degree or a museum studies degree in lots of different ways, not just at museums. For example, a lot of really big companies have their own archives. So, for example, Campbell Soup Company has an awesome archive. Disney has an amazing archive. I have a colleague who actually applied for a job with Lucasfilm. I have another colleague who was really interested in going to work at Hershey, Pennsylvania, for the Hershey Company, because they have an amazing archive and museum. Now I work for the federal government, which has been amazing for me. I work for the museum, but as a federal employee, I also am able to leverage a lot of, the advantages to being a federal employee. Working for the federal government, you get great pay, great benefits, as opposed to, say, if I was working at a museum, down the road, a local historical museum, I might not be getting paid as much, and I might not have as great benefits. Now, there's sometimes some downsides to working for the federal government, but for the most part, I have found it to be very beneficial. And it's not just the museums within the federal system. Also think about, the National Park Service. They need museum curators, they need archivists, they need museum specialists. I know they hire a ton. The National Archives. So if you've ever visited a presidential museum, for example, one of my favorites is President Roosevelt's Museum at Hyde Park in New York. All of those are federal positions as well. So it's not just at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. It's not just at the Marine Museum. It's not just at the Army Museum up at Carlisle Barracks. There's a lot of opportunities for museum specialists and curators to go into the museum field within the federal government. But if not, there's also just a ton of amazing jobs out there that are a lot of fun, that provide you a lot of opportunities. Universities, Wright State University has a great archives, great museum program, but all the universities, Ohio State University, even our local libraries hire archivists and museum specialists to care for their rare books and collections. So, again, it's a career field that is definitely broadening, especially now that we're getting into a more digital age. Museums need archivists and curators to help make these materials available to people in a new digital world. I know at the museum, we are busy scanning all of our photographs and all of our scrapbooks. If you get on our Facebook page, you can see a whole lot of content that we've put up, and a lot of ways we can engage our public. So if they can't come to the museum, especially during these crazy COVID times, they can still, understand and learn from that history. But I really can't say enough about museum studies. If you're interested in history, if you're interested in, you know, kind of getting into the arts and humanities in a way that isn't necessarily music or performance, museum studies is really a great path that you can explore, and one that I never thought I was going to go into. I just thought I liked history, but it turns out I've really had a great career, and I'm really excited to share this with people because nobody told me that this was an option. I just kind of stumbled upon it by accident, but it's it's been very rewarding, and I'm looking forward to the future. And again, I'm interested in sharing with anybody anything they need to help get them into researching more about the museum field. So I don't know if there's any questions. I just threw a whole bunch at you, but I'm more than happy to answer questions if there are any. Well, if there are no questions, I will just say, if you haven't been to your museum at the National Museum of the United States Air Force lately, definitely check that out, because there's a lot of, I have a question.
Yeah, in the chat.
I see. Oh, okay. So number one, what bits of advice would you give greening grads to help find their career path? So for me, honestly, I went to college, and or even if you don't go to college, at the end of the day, if you are in college and you have all these options, for me, I was like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And this is the number one thing that I learned in my experience, and my parents told me, is that when you're 17, 18, 19, going to college, you don't have to know right away. People are like, oh, what are you going to major in? You don't have to know right away. You can go and you can, declare a major, and then find out what you're interested in. I had no idea I wanted to major in history until I took that history class that I was required to take. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I love. So in terms of finding your career path, don't feel like you have to do it right away. Go to college or work, whatever you want to do to help find that career path. You don't have to know at that moment. I'm almost 40, and I'm still trying to decide what I want to be when I grow up. So I don't think that's a bad thing. Just kind of let your interests and your gut be your guide. You will find the thing that you love to do. And honestly, I think that is how you find your career path, is doing something you love, because it is not worth working every day and doing something that you don't love doing. So that's my number one piece of advice, is just go, put your toe in, experience everything, and then decide as you grow and get older and say, I might be interested in doing this. That's my number one piece of advice. The other question I have is, what's your favorite part of the job? So my favorite part of the job is when we put up an exhibit and I see people walk through it for the first time. And sometimes I know the people, sometimes I just go sit in the gallery. But I see people read the exhibit text, or I see them look at an artifact, and then I see them, I don't want to say get emotional, but I see them go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't know if anyone has experienced that, where you walk into a place or you see something and you get goosebumps. That, as a curator, that's what you want to do. People learn history or remember history here first and here second. So my job, that I take very personally, is trying to make people learn history here, and then it'll stay here forever. So that's my favorite part of the job, is watching that happen. One of the airplanes we have at the museum is SAM 26,000, or Air Force One. This is the airplane that brought back President Kennedy's body after he was assassinated. And my mother walked through it one time with me, and she got very emotional. And the reason was because when she was 10 years old, she watched that happen on TV. And then all of a sudden now she's standing on that airplane, and she started to cry. And she said, this is so crazy. I'm standing in this place, and it was such an important moment in my life, and now I'm standing right here. Public historians call that the power of place. And that's what we want people to feel anytime they go to a museum. And it doesn't have to be throughout the entire museum. We're not trying to make people cry the whole way through a museum. We just want them to feel history so they learn history in both places. So that's my favorite part of the job, is when we succeed in doing that. So how long have I been at my current position? Well, I was an intern there, and that was during my between my junior and senior year of college. So that was 2002. So I did my internship. I went back. I graduated. Then I went back. They invited me back to do what's called a co-op. So basically, they said, well, if you go back to school, we'll let you work here while you go to school. So that's why I went to get my master's degree. Basically, as long as I was in school, I had a job, and I loved working there. So I've been full-time at the museum since 2003. So I guess I'm coming up on 20 years, which is weird to say, but it's gone very fast, because again, I love my job. I love the people I work with, and I love the museum. My parents were in the Air Force, so it's really nice to be able to give back in that way. The history really interests me, and I learn something new every day. And I learn about new ways that the Air Force is helping people, how the museum supports the Air Force, and how the Air Force supports the museum is pretty unique. So I enjoy learning about that, and I've been there for almost 20 years. So that's the answer to that one. So if you haven't been there in a while, make sure you go. It's free. It's open 7 days a week. You have to wear a mask right now, but you can go. So. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you for having me and listening to me ramble.